The Galaxy S26 Ultra is Samsung's most innovative phone or slab phone in the years. Here is our 2-week review of the Galaxy S26 Ultra. Welcome back to SamMobile TV. You're here with Daniel. The Galaxy S26 Ultra is cutting a controversial figure. A lot of the outcry and negativity about this phone has come from people who have spent 5 minutes with it in the shop, or they're reading about it online, not someone that's actually used it like I have. I've been using it every day, and real usage is more important for a phone like this than just what you read on a spec sheet or see in a retail store. I want to start with the most controversial part of this phone, and that's the display. The display is actually amazing. There, I said it. Not only is it plenty bright outdoors, but it's also just really pleasing to look at from a visual point of view. Is there things that they've changed since last year? Yes. It's slightly more reflective when the screen is off, and that's realistically from a functional point of view about it. Anything talking about the text and under a microscope isn't relevant because you don't use your phone like that. I will talk about the 10-bit versus 8-bit controversy a little bit here. Samsung did say to everyone that the display shows off 10-bit color depth. But what got lost amongst most of that is Samsung didn't necessarily say the display was 10-bit. They talked about a custom processor with MNDIE as a process behind the scenes to upscale everything to that 10-bit color depth. Personally myself, I remember being told 10-bit, but I also might have missed that part where they talked about MNDIE and the custom processor to drive all of that. The end result is effectively the same. Samsung is got a display that is showing off 10-bit color depth, but the native bits of the panel is only 8. So there's software and hardware processing that's actually pumping it up. Will you notice it? No, you won't. You won't actually notice. I don't even think you'll notice the difference between 8-bit and 10-bit. But I think what it just comes down to is that communication, where we weren't explicitly told it's an 8-bit panel going up to 10 bits via emulation or whatever process they're using. We weren't necessarily told that specifically, or at least we maybe didn't pay attention. The crux of it is, though, you basically would just be enjoying the display. You won't even think, oh, that looks like 8-bit to 10-bit emulation. You'll just be looking at the display and enjoying it because it's a great one. The other big talking point here is the reaction to the new feature, privacy display. Give me a break. The review is about the phone. If I could review the reaction to this feature, we'd be here a while. The feature literally works as advertised, as intended, and I think beyond the expectations of what you might think a first-gen version of this feature would do. A first-gen version, you might expect to just be able to toggle it on and toggle it off, and that'd be the end of it. But Samsung, from the start, have built in conditions. So when you long press on here, you can see there's conditions for turning on, and there's an even extra toggle for maximum privacy protection. You've got the conditions built for apps, where any app that you can choose to open, it will activate the privacy display. And you've got PIN, pattern, and password that you can turn on too. So every time that you go to unlock your phone screen or enter a password field, the privacy display activates and no one can see it. And yes, that is there to negate the camera bump because it wobbles. Or just the fact you've got the notification pop-ups, where when you get a notification on the screen, it will just shut off the pixels or the wide pixel on that part of the screen. Genius. It's the type of feature that made me love using Samsung in the first place. That little bit of creativity that they put into their phones, where it might look like a gimmick, but actually creeps into real-world usage and becomes a staple of the smartphone industry in years to come. Just thinking personally about myself with this feature, I go to a lot of press briefings, a lot of them before announcements, and I take a lot of notes. I like to view those notes on planes or I'm at airports, and just having the opportunity to launch my Samsung Notes, turn on privacy display, so then when people are looking over my shoulder, they don't see it, is great, because then I still get to see it and they don't. It's genuinely useful, and I think it deserves praise, as opposed to everyone just looking at it and thinking it's not very good. The design, which is less innovative, but I still think deserves a mention here, because Samsung have managed to slim the design down from last year's S25 Ultra, make it also 4 grams lighter, whilst also maintaining all of the core internals and improving on them. Bigger vapor chamber, better processor, and still fitting in the cameras that they've got. You've got to be impressed by that. And we'll head to the cameras next. If you're into capturing your world around you with your phone, you're not going to be bored with the Galaxy S26 Ultra. It has pretty much everything a creator on their smartphone would want or need, because the camera pipeline isn't just about these things here on the back. It's about the ecosystem of services that surround it. The output first, Samsung have nailed it here. The photos are bright, contrasty, with plenty of dynamic range to be able to see what's going on in the photo, and also detailed enough, thanks to new features like the 24 megapixel resolution that you can activate in Camera Assistant. What's also made a big difference is the new f1.4 aperture here on this back main camera. Not only does it allow for better low light shots, especially when you compare it to other phones like the iPhone 17 Pro Max or the S25 Ultra from last year, but it also allows for the camera to rework how the rest of it works. So the shutter speed and the ISO get changed because of the fact it's actually taking more light in. It doesn't need to be open as long as far as the shutter goes. That helps with action shots. So if you're taking photos of kids playing sport or just people moving in general, it's actually going to have less motion blur because it's capturing it faster. There is a disappointing aspect to the camera hardware in that the 5x camera loses that minimum focus distance that the S25 Ultra has got. And whilst I think on paper that it is disappointing and in actual fact it doesn't work as well, I think the rest of the camera kind of makes up for it. But you just have to be aware of that if you were someone who uses that from the S24 Ultra and the S25 Ultra, that has changed this year. Also, from a functional level, disappointment about the 3x camera still being pretty much the same style of camera from all the way back to the S21 Ultra. So that's a little bit disappointing too. But the hardware is one aspect. Where I've enjoyed most of my time with the cameras on the S26 Ultra is the software. I did make a video breaking down the 10 amazing upgrades that the S26 Ultra cameras have got, and a lot of it's in there. But I am going to talk about it here, especially the ones I use the most. As I mentioned, turning on that 24 megapixel mode inside Camera Assistant has truly transformed how I use this phone. Having access to this in here, yes, I believe it should just be part of the default camera. You shouldn't have to go to Camera Assistant to turn this on. But this toggle here, keep 24 megapixel resolution on, just means that every time you launch the camera, that 24 megapixel is going to be the one that you use. And unlike when you switch to the 50 megapixel or the 200 megapixel, you don't lose access to the 10x crop or the 2x crop or the 3x crop. It keeps them all there because the software is smart enough to know that those cameras or that crop doesn't support 24 megapixel and will just scale it down to 12 megapixel. The 24 megapixel versus 12 megapixel shots show you how much more detail you get without sacrificing dynamic range. Especially when you compare it to last year's S25 Ultra, the overall picture is just better. But really what I love using the most is the video functions. For me, the horizontal lock is a feature that has truly transformed how I capture sort of videos of my son at football training. Obviously, I'm exaggerating in a lot of the examples that I'm putting forward here, but that's just to really show you the power of it. The way that you can follow along the subject without having to focus too much on keeping it stable in your hand, it's truly magic, especially when you see the end result. Or if you're into video creation, the APV video codec just means you actually get true lossless video on your smartphone. And the fact that Samsung don't limit this to any resolution or frame rate, like I can choose 8K 30 here with APV log and it doesn't tell me I need to save it to external drive. It does say I've only got 2 minutes of storage space left for this, but whatever. Even with 4K 120, it's not locked to external storage. I can do it here again, 2 minutes. But it's not just about the fact that they let you capture it on the phone, but it's their built-in software mechanisms to be able to actually edit it. So here's a APV log video taken down at Burleigh Beach. You can see it's 1.7 gig for 22 seconds, which is crazy. But if I hit this edit toggle here, Samsung have built in, especially for log video, they built in the option to add in LUTs. Inbuilt, free of charge, no need to pay extra for them, and you can see the change that it makes to the video. And what's great too is how fast it processes it. So if I hit save copy, that's going to rip through that 22 seconds of footage in no time whatsoever, and then it actually compresses it down so I can export it on and send it to people into a format that's shareable. And you still maintain that quality because it's taking it from a higher fidelity and just compressing it. So you still get detail, you still get dynamic range, and you get that beautiful LUT over the top of it. It's video quality we haven't seen on an Android before, let alone a Samsung. And really the experience gets completed for me with One UI 8.5, the final version. The software is fast, responsive, with all of the customization options that you could want. The new quick panel is here. You've got the new designs when it comes to the apps, which give it that nice fresh feel and look. It's just a really nice software experience that I think completes the hardware. One UI in the last 12 months has taken on a new life of its own. Since the launch of One UI 7, Samsung has shifted direction to focus more on these quality interactions, these smooth animations, and these new customizations. And I think a lot of it comes down to them wanting to incorporate features in Galaxy AI that are kind of seamless in their interpretation as opposed to needing to go hunting for them. Features like the new call screening, which give you the option to screen calls, but it also has settings to auto screen calls. It also gives you type to voice, so you can type out a response, which will then send back to the other person. Or you've got features like Now Nudge, which sort of bring things to the surface if you're getting text messages sent to you, so then you don't have to go hunting for them. It just works. I think we live in a world now where the hardware performance of a phone is high enough, especially when you factor in the chipsets of the last probably 3 to 4 years, powerful enough to do most things on a smartphone. This phone will smoothly play games in your downtime. Like, you can sit there and play games for an extended period of time without having to worry about any frame drops or any performance issues. It'll just get you through that game comfortably and coolly as well with the new vapor chamber. And it'll also excel at using powerful features like Samsung DeX, where you can turn your phone into that desktop experience and even edit videos on it. But what I want to give a mention to here is the battery. Despite not increasing the capacity for the last 6 generations, like, this is still a 5,000 milliamp hour capacity battery. And whilst I know that that might disappoint a lot of people from a numbers point of view, it doesn't actually tell the story of how the battery has been like to use. If I go back to previous days, the usage has been exceptional. I've consistently been getting around about a day and a half of usage out of the battery, so then I just wait till I need to top it up. But it's not just about the screen on time and how that all works. It's actually the battery standby time, which I've been really impressed by. The other day, I was doing a little side-by-side to some other phones, and what I noticed is that I went to bed with the S26 Ultra at 47%, and I woke up with it at 44%. That's a 3% drop in battery over the course of a 7-hour night of sleep. That's pretty incredible. Comparatively, the iPhone lost 9% in that same time period of standby. And then you've got the rapidness of Samsung's 60-watt fast charging, which actually my comparisons have been incredible. I did a side-by-side to the S25 Ultra, and the battery percentages were wildly different. Like, this was somewhere in the 50s, this was somewhere in the 20s. And then by the time I went back and checked, they were only about less than 10% apart in the same time period. This was somewhere in the 80s, this was close to the 80s, but in the 70s. So the fact that with less charge, it was able to get close to the S25 Ultra means that you're going to get exceptional battery performance out of this phone, and you've got good charging to go with it now. Because the 60 watt isn't just about the 60 watt, it's about the algorithm and how it sustains itself to get you to 100%. This is why the numbers on the spec sheet don't tell the story of a smartphone. The functional and practical use of a smartphone matters more than what people say that haven't used the phone on the internet. Because if you read the internet, no one should buy this. This should be a phone that everyone ignores and they wait till the S28 Ultra. No MagSafe internally, no Bluetooth S Pen, which you still have to appreciate that despite making this thinner and lighter, the S Pen is even here at all. You've got no updated 3x camera, you've got no 1-inch main sensor. All that stuff a lot of people will look at and then ignore the phone entirely. And all that stuff also means it's not perfect. And no smartphone's ever going to be perfect. The phones with the amazing hardware don't have good software, but the people who appreciate hardware love it. The people who appreciate software don't, which means it's impossible to please everyone 100% of the time. But I think the Ultra no longer represents Ultra specs, is now representing of an Ultra experience. This was our review of the Galaxy S26 Ultra after spending time with it for the last 2 weeks. Obviously, as we use the phone more, we'll have more to say about it. So make sure you hit subscribe to SamMobile TV. Make sure you go find us on our website and all on our socials, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.